Hey, everybody. My name is Kate Christian. For those of you who don't know, I'm the Corporate Sustainability Coordinator for EcoCycle, and I run the Green Star Business Network, which most of you know because you are members. Today, we're going to have this great presentation by Randy Moorman, the Director of Campaigns at EcoCycle. Randy, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Kate. And it's great to be with you all here today. I'm going to just jump in with a quick question for you all. Who today engaged in a circular economy? And think about that a minute if you did. I will say that if you recycled, then you engaged in a circular economy. And it's not something that is necessarily common in our vocabulary. So we're going to get into a little bit today what it is and really focus on why we need it now. To start, I'm going to kind of walk us through a roadmap of where we are going. So we start with where we are now, what is happening nationally in recycling and in Colorado. And then I'm going to get into defining what a circular economy is and talk about some examples and where we are headed with that. And then finally end with addressing the big elephant in the room, COVID-19. But to first start us off, kind of who we are, who is EcoCycle. We grew out of a grassroots effort. We were started by volunteers, and these volunteers were driven by passion. And today we have lots of passionate people in our community trying to make change, and that makes up who EcoCycle is even today. So we've been doing this for about 40 plus years, engaging people through recycling to create larger community change. We've been around the block in the recycling industry. We started one of the first 20 curbside recycling programs in the US in Boulder. And over the past 40 years, we have grown into a thriving recycling business. We currently employ over 65,000 people and manage a $5 million budget. We are recognized as a leader in developing innovative programs, and our staff have worked around the world, literally from Nebraska to Nepal, to help share our models with other communities. So what makes EcoCycle unique is that we really have a hands-on experience in every aspect of building a zero-waste community. First of all, we run major pieces of infrastructure like the Boulder County Recycling Center, which is shown in the upper left, where we process 50,000 tons of recycling per year. This means that we really know the ins and outs of recycling, of collecting, processing, and marketing materials. We also run a fleet of trucks to collect recycling and compost from businesses. See in the lower left, that's one of our compost dumpsters that you may be very well familiar with if you have us collecting from your business. And we really are able then to understand the challenges of hauling materials, educating customers, and also running trucks. We are also educators. We work with schools to teach kids the importance of recycling, and that's what you see in the upper right there. A bunch of kids showing off their recycling program for lunch. And we're also at local festivals and other events, educating residents and empowering people to change the culture that they live in. And then lastly, we work with local and state government to implement policies to make recycling more convenient and accessible. And that's really the area that I focus on with EcoCycle. We speak from experience, and because of that, we are able to really talk about all these different aspects and how we can put them into practice and really make change. So where are we now? Well, before coronavirus, there was a lot of national news about recycling being dead. And this is really in part due to the China situation. So what really has been happening? Well, the problem has been festering for a long time. And the inside scoop that I'm going to give you is that the recycling industry really knew about it and knew that it was coming. And it kind of became a perfect storm. So before China stopped accepting our recyclable materials or put really strict regulations on what they would accept, a third of the US recyclable paper and plastic was shipped to China. And then China really, at the time, had a booming economy, and they needed more and more paper to make cardboard, Amazon boxes, and many other types of materials. And they used our recycled materials then to grow their economy. But over the years, things got dirty, and we got lazy and sent China contaminated materials and plastics that were actually harder and harder to recycle. So China started to establish its own infrastructure, and then they cut us off. They stopped buying our recyclables and only accepted the cleanest of materials. So this then really created a big oversupply of materials here in the US. And it became a buyer's market. There was a lot to buy, but not a lot of folks buying these materials. And so prices then began to drop. We also had other problems that led to this perfect storm. The US was not paying enough attention to education, and we really had highly contaminated recycled materials. And there was this myth that we can recycle all the plastics that we've made, and that is just not true. We really have a lack of producer responsibility for materials being produced, and then really putting the responsibility on the consumer and the recycler to figure out what to do with all these materials. Also, I want to add that since 2000, the US lost domestic manufacturing. And so we really didn't have as many paper mills and other types of facilities and manufacturing facilities to bring back and put back online to then quickly address this glut of materials that we now found to have in the country from our problem with China. Stop taking our materials. So that started to really build this perfect storm. And then to add to that, there were other factors outside of our control. The cost of oil dropped. We've had a long history of huge subsidies for resource extraction, making it much cheaper to manufacture products from natural resources instead of recycled materials. And then there's the current trade wars that have been going on, rising labor costs. And so all of this really created a cacophony of problems that the recycling industry had to face all at once. And it just really became a huge, huge challenge. So for example, the price for selling recycled cardboard has dropped to its lowest levels in 25 years, down less than $30 a ton. And that was in mid-2019. Compare that to the beginning of 2019 when it was $70 a ton. And then back in 2017, it was $180 a ton. So it has dropped substantially since then. We've seen as a result of this perfect storm with China and these other factors coming into play that several states now are having to really temporarily landfill their recyclable materials because they just have too much of it and can't deal with the oversupply. Some of the hardest hit materials that we are seeing are mixed paper and those hard to recycle plastics that I mentioned, 3 through 7s. And then we've also, because of this dramatic drop in prices to sell materials, have really had to start now charging to recycle materials. And so in a lot of cities where it's been a long time that recycling has been seen as a free service you get is no longer free, and there now has to come a cost with it. All of this is noticeable in Colorado, but it is certainly much, much worse in other parts of the country, especially those on the coasts that were much more heavily reliant on exporting to China than we have been. So the lessons that we've learned from all of this, we can kind of put down into 3 categories. And we really now have an opportunity to correct our course. The first thing we must do is reinvest in US manufacturing. And then we need to recognize that some materials are better than others for recycling. And recycling then isn't necessarily the only answer. We need to be looking for other options to deal with materials. And finally, we really need to fix our economics. I talked about the low oil prices and how that's creating a problem for the recycling market. Recycling can't compete with that. And so we really now need to start thinking about changing who pays for recycling. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So this brings me to what's actually happening now here in Colorado. For the past couple of years, we've been publishing a report with COPERG called The State of Recycling in Colorado. And we've looked at the state as a whole, as well as Colorado cities, to evaluate and see what they're doing well and where some of the challenges are. So my question that I'd like to ask you all is, what is Colorado's recycling rate? It's 17%, 23%, or 35%? The answer is actually 17%. If you go back, the 23% is Denver's recycling rate, and then 35% is the national average. So we are one of the worst states at waste diversion in the country, and that may be shocking to a lot of people when you think we're so green and so really invested in protecting our environment. Well, we really need some support and some help. And you look at over the past 10 years, the recycling rates have barely risen. That's the blue line on the bottom of this graph. While the solid waste, the top line that we produce, continues to rise. So the truth is that the free market is not going to drive us toward waste reduction and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We really need some state action to revise this trend. Landfill prices are really too low and do not account for the air and water pollution and long-term risks that we get with landfills. And recycling really is undervalued, and it's underdeveloped in Colorado, but it's undervalued. And the benefits of cleaner air and water, reduced climate emissions, and local green jobs are just not really accounted for currently. Well, in our survey of the cities for our report, what we found was that only 25 cities actually track their recycling rate. So we first have to address a data gap to really get a better handle of how we're doing and where we need to go as a state. But what we do know from the cities that do have data, that Boulder has the best citywide rate thanks to their universal zero waste ordinance that requires businesses to recycle and compost. Loveland stands out because it has the best recycling for home residents at 60%. And then Fort Collins has made some huge strides in their diversion rate for construction materials, and that's currently at 73%. And then Boulder County has the highest front range diversion of any county at 73%. And then if we look at the greater Colorado, Durango leads with 31% residential and commercial diversion, and Pitkin County leads at 37%. So what's happening at the city level? Well, what we know is that making recycling and composting easy and convenient is really the key to increasing our recycling rates. And what we see is that only 30 Colorado cities out of 270 total provide residents with curbside recycling. And then we look at the Front Range, only 7 out of 10 of Colorado's largest cities do not provide curbside recycling to all their residents. And the figure on the right is the major Front Range cities, and we only see 3 of those that are providing curbside recycling to their residents. So this is a huge problem that we have to overcome if we want to improve our recycling rates. We really need to increase access and making it more easy and convenient to our residents. So why aren't we doing better? Well, there's 4 primary challenges that Colorado faces. And the first and most important is an economic one. Trash is incredibly cheap here. We have a lot of land, and so landfills don't cost that much. And that's especially true along the Front Range where most of our population is and most of our waste is produced. So this means that the free market is not going to deliver us more recycling and composting without policy direction. And part of that economic challenge is also the lack of nearby businesses to reuse and remanufacture our discards into new products. We're going to come back to that point later when we talk about solutions, so remember that. Colorado is an island really in the middle of the country. We're far from other major industrial cities or ports, so that makes it really hard for us to get things to market, especially when that market is not here in Colorado. And it's even harder then for our rural areas that must first overcome big transportation distances, and that comes with huge costs for them. So it is just so much cheaper to landfill a lot of this valuable material than try to ship it to the Front Range or elsewhere. And then lastly, one of the keys of success that we have seen in other states is really strong support from both the state and local level, and we lack that here in Colorado. So now we're going to get to the solutions. And the solutions for Colorado are really not surprisingly that much different or are very similar to what we would think of for the US and even for the world. But I want to first remind ourselves of something, and that is that we have been stuck far too long in a linear economy. We extract resources causing major environmental damage like mining bauxite ore for aluminum or fracking oil for plastics. And then we manufacture products from those resources, which also causes air and water pollution. And then the products are consumed in our communities, and then the resources are destroyed. They're disposed of in a landfill where they can't be used again, or worse, they're causing pollution in our soils, our rivers, our oceans, like plastic. Or they're incinerated, but thankfully we don't have any incinerators today in Colorado. So thinking about that linear economy, let's first talk about plastics as an example. Plastic pollution has been in the news a lot lately, and we are starting to see a global backlash against plastics. For too long, plastics have kind of gotten a free pass with the idea that we can just simply recycle all the plastics that we make, that we're producing. But it's important to note that out of all of the plastics that we've ever made on the planet, only 9% have been recycled. So we really cannot recycle our way out of the problem. And that is in part due because plastics, a lot of plastics are made of a conglomerate of several different types of polymers. And quite honestly, plastic manufacturers are just not willing to take back recycled plastics. It's really much easier and cheaper for them to use virgin oil to make new plastic. And here's some other stats that are pretty startling. You may have seen that by 2050, there's going to be more plastic in the ocean by volume than fish. And we are expecting at the current rate that we're on right now, the plastic production will quadruple by that same time period by 2050. So when we think about plastic recycling, it's important to note that a lot of the plastics that we collect to be recycled aren't being made into new products like the same ones they came from, like plastic bottles, for example. Some plastic bottles are made into new plastic bottles when they're recycled, but a lot of them are not. And we call this actually downcycling, where they're made into other products that in the end eventually go to the landfill. So an example here is making clothing out of plastics, recycled plastics. And as a result of this, we really have to continue to drill for oil to make more plastics. One of the major goals of recycling is not to save landfills, but really to save natural resources. And we're not very successful at doing that when we are taking our recyclable plastics and making them into something else, and then we still have to go back and extract more natural resources like oil to make more plastics. So this is really something that is very different about plastics from other materials like metals and glass? We can recycle metal and glass indefinitely. And if we did that, we wouldn't need to mine for more resources to make metal and glass. But the problem right now today is we have to continue drilling for oil to make more plastics, no matter how much plastic we actually recycle. So we really need to be thinking about more solutions for plastics than we currently are. This graphic is from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and I think it really shows their thinking about how recycling alone isn't going to solve the problem. You can see the bottom 50% of our plastics, they think we truly can recycle. And then the remainder, we have to figure out to do something different. And, think about reuse, for example, and then really reducing our overall production and consumption of plastics. And that's when bans come into play. And then really scaling up the recycling that we can do. I think this is encouraging that the EU is planning to ban single-use plastics by 2021, a year from now. And this graphic is a great one of showing all the different types of single-use plastics that they are finding on European beaches. 50% of the litter comes from single-use plastic items. And so I'm hopeful that we can see more of these kind of bans come into play and really force us to change our thinking about single-use items. So recycling really needs to evolve. When we recycle plastics once, twice, and then it eventually ends up in the landfill because it's made into another product that it has an end of life to it, that is this recycling economy that you see in the middle of the graphic here. And we really need to evolve, continue evolving from a linear economy, recycling economy, and now finally to a circular economy where we use materials over and over again and they're not going to the landfill, those valuable resources. And we really need to think about keeping going with things like plastic and get us to that circular economy. So what is a circular economy then? Well, it uses less extractive resources and sends little to nothing to the landfill. And it really incorporates a clean production of materials, of products. It focuses a lot on reuse and repair. We always talk about reuse and reduce and reuse come before recycle. So that needs to become more and more an integral part of our economy. And then finally, the recycling and resource recovery component is there as well. So that's a simplified version of a circular economy. Here's a much more complex graphic, again from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. But I think we don't need to get into the real details of this. We can really simplify our thinking about what a circular economy is by thinking in terms of zero waste. It's much easier to understand in those terms for both individual businesses and for consumers. So our vision of zero waste is that it goes beyond recycling and composting to fundamentally change how we make, consume, and dispose of our stuff. And then that's in the design. And then we capture our waste and use it instead of our natural resources to make new products. That's zero waste. And really that is what we're talking about when we're talking about a circular economy. So how do we move forward in building this circular economy? I think there's 4 components that I want to talk about today. One is looking to you guys, to businesses, taking leadership in this. That's so integral and so important. And then second, we do have to reinvest in recycling. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. We need to build our end markets. That's so important, and that's so lacking, especially here in Colorado. And then finally, we've got to talk about climate as a part of this, and that the circular economy is such an important solution for addressing climate change. So first, the business leadership part of it. Businesses, some of them have gotten it and realized that the waste is a lost resource. These businesses were some of the first adopters of zero waste because they understood what they're throwing away is costing them money. And zero waste helps them be more efficient. Example, Xerox, they set a goal of 0 accidents, 0 defects, 0 waste. And these companies are still coming to realize that people want to work for companies that are socially responsible. And so employees now have new expectations, and that the companies that they're going to work for, especially the new folks coming into the workforce right out of college, have these new expectations that there better be a sustainability component to the mission of the business I'm going to work for. And so there's that expectation, which is a good sign. So reducing waste is important, but we also need to be thinking about how we are creating products. And, making every product sustainable is great, like 3M is focused on doing. And they are also focused on making sustainable choices in their business operations. That is also great. But we need to caution ourselves with some of these businesses that we are wanting to hold up as models, that thinking about, does it make sense though, you're doing all of that effort to invest in sustainability and then you're launching 1,000 new products every year? Can we really sustain that? So that needs to be part of our thinking as well. And there's some businesses that are doing that. We are seeing some change, which is good. Some businesses are starting with waste as the gateway to consumption, meaning that they're rethinking their business model. One new idea is really reinvesting in durables, quality over quantity, rethinking the whole relationship with the customer, selling a service instead of a product. So Patagonia is a good example of this. They're changing the way they promote their products, extending the life of textile products, making the products more recyclable, and creating markets for recycled textiles. And that is so important. Back to when I was talking about plastics, and that the industry doesn't want recycled content to come back to them. But here we have an example of a company that does want that. They want to see how they can get that recycled textiles back to them to be made into new products. They have this new worn wear model, where they're really designing for durability to maximize the reuse potential of each garment. They're sharing the resale value with their customers that return garments through a trade-in value, promoting repair. I was very fortunate to go and have a jacket that wasn't even Patagonia to the store, and they fixed my zipper. And that was really awesome that they're investing so much in this, that they're even doing it for other products that aren't even theirs, to extend the lifetime of garments. And supporting markets by using recycled fibers, which I mentioned, and really conducting research to find advanced processes for recycling used clothing at the highest functional value possible. This is all really good and leadership level stuff that's exciting to see. Another great company or business that I want to talk about is Loop. It's a great example of how we can go beyond recycling, and they're really exemplifying the idea of rethinking systems. Not just what am I doing with this product, but what am I doing with the whole system that this product is a part of, and what I can create that is designed to be reusable. So the biggest brands are starting to get on board and starting to work with Loop and starting to get behind a massive scale investment of reuse. It's really the old milk delivery system of a reusable bottle delivered to your door. You use the product, you put the reusable bottle or container back out to be collected and used again by the same company. And, initially we thought reuse was going to be hard to sell to these bigger companies. We could see it maybe working on a smaller scale, but just thought it might be hard to justify the economics on larger scales. But now we're seeing that happen, that breakthrough happen. So it's very exciting. And Loop is really there to help make that change. I mentioned some of the biggest brands have invested years of research into launching some sustainable refillable product lines. So it'll be really cool to start to see those come out more and more in the next couple of years. So those were good examples of companies really starting to see the value of a circular economy and how they play a role in that, and start to make some changes and move in that direction away from a linear economy. So as I showed earlier, though, Colorado sucks at recycling, and so we really need to also return to some of the basics and reinvest in recycling. Last year, EcoCycle, as well as our statewide organization, Recycle Colorado, and many other member organizations, worked very hard with the state legislature to pass Senate Bill 19-192. It's the Front Range Waste Diversion Fund. And what it does is it adds a tipping fee at the landfill. So when haulers go to dump their materials at the landfill, they pay an extra fee. And that will ratchet up by 50 cents over 4 years to $4 a ton after those first 4 years and stay there. And then that money is collected into a grant program that Front Range communities, that includes government, businesses, nonprofits, schools, you name it, can apply for this grant money to invest back into recycling programs. So it's very exciting. It's a huge win for trying to reinvest in recycling here in the state. And another piece of thinking about reinvestment in recycling is this idea of extended producer responsibility. We call it EPR in the industry. And you know, one of the lessons that we learned from the current recycling crisis is that we need to change who's paying for recycling. Currently, all the burden falls on local governments to pay for and provide services to collect materials and determine how to dispose or recycle them. And of course, a lot of that burden then is passed down to the residents, the customers. So that responsibility needs to change, and it needs to change to the producers, to the manufacturers. Europe and Canada have already instituted EPR laws for a while now. One of the best examples is British Columbia, where they're requiring manufacturers to pay 100% for the collection and recycling of their products. So the ultimate goal then of these EPR programs is that the manufacturer then takes back their products and reuses them to make future products. And so forcing them basically through policy to pay for the recycling programs of those products really helps them, I think, design better products that then can come back to them and be reused, or at least the materials from the products. So recall that one of the big economic challenges we have here in Colorado is that we lack nearby businesses to reuse and remanufacture our discards into new products. Well, these pictures are from South Carolina, and the state has done very well in investing and bringing in markets to the state to take recycled materials and use those as resources to make new products. One major business or industry in South Carolina is the plastic bottle manufacturing industry. And they have invested a lot with the state government and partners to set up recycling programs in the state to take back those plastic bottles so that they can then be manufactured again into plastic bottles. The South Carolina has a state-run market development center that attracts in-market businesses to the state and provides them technical and financial assistance. So that is something we really need here in Colorado. We have been successful in terms of glass, and that has only been for the last couple of years. Momentum Glass Recycling is a entrepreneurial business that came in from Utah and saw this need to close the loop on glass. We already had in Colorado 2 bottle companies, Rocky Mountain Bottle in Wheat Ridge and OI in the northern part of the state. And they needed more glass to recycled glass, because it's very costly for them to make glass bottles for our beer industry. It's very expensive for them because you have to heat these furnaces at very high temperatures. It takes lots of energy to make glass from sand and other materials that is used to make glass. And so using recycled glass really helps lower their costs on the manufacturing end. And what was happening before Momentum is that glass was being collected by a lot of recycling programs across the state. They would go to recycling centers, but glass is such a heavy material, it breaks into really small pieces, and it affects the machinery in such a damaging way that those recycling plants were siphoning off the glass and sending it to the landfill as daily cover. It was just too costly for them to go to the effort to clean that glass up and send it back to be recycled. So Momentum came into the picture and really closed the loop. They are solely a glass recycling processor. They take the glass from our recycling centers, from our single stream programs, they clean it up, separate it, and then sell it back to the bottling companies. And so this is a great success story for Colorado. And we really need to see how we can attract more businesses like Momentum to close more loops for other materials here in Colorado. So this year at the state legislature, we are working on a bill, Senate Bill 55, to develop recycling end markets here. There's three main things that the bill will do. One is create that end market development center to attract businesses here, provide them financial incentives, really help them get started in the state. The bill also is going to conduct a study and provide recommendations on EPR policy, which again is really needed, as I talked about earlier. And then also provide a statewide education campaign on recycling, similar to what you saw in South Carolina, hopefully, on this kind of creating logos and marketing campaigns about recycling equals jobs, recycling fights climate change, those kind of things to get more communities engaged. So finally, the last piece of the solution is changing the conversation. And what we mean by that is that circular economy is not just a waste issue, it's a climate issue. Climate is the biggest crisis we are facing now and have been for quite a while. And Green Star businesses, like maybe yours, are not just working on waste, they are working on climate and addressing solutions for climate. This graphic is from the city of Boulder, and it just shows that diverting as much as 51% of our waste in the city of Boulder through recycling and composting and reuse saves greenhouse gas equivalent of taking over 20,000 cars off the road every year. That is a very significant impact. And so, you know, recycling and zero waste needs to be more and more a part of our climate solutions locally and at the state level. This is from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and you know, just highlighting this idea that nationally we're, you know, by investing in renewables, which is very important in energy efficiency and in transportation, is only going to get at 55% of our emissions. And so for us to really get to the goals close to zero emissions, we've got this whole other 45% that we need to address. And that's in our products and our manufacturing. And the only way we're going to get to that is by developing a circular economy. So we need to rethink recycling. It's an important feedstock for manufacturing for new products to grow this circular economy. And it's also a proven solution to reduce carbon pollution. So what about COVID-19? Well, the bad news is that we've seen, as a result of the pandemic, increased costs to recycling providers for employee safety, such as enhanced personal protection equipment or PPE, and increased cleaning procedures, labor shortages, and hazard pay for workers. We've also noticed lost revenue from commercial accounts as businesses have had to close and restaurants, closures to drop-off centers and public-facing facilities that have to interact with the public in close distance. We're expecting further declines in the recycling market due to reduced manufacturing operations, constrained shipping that's occurring, and further projected market declines really from a potential economic recession. And we just found out that the state of Colorado is going to be facing a $3 billion shortfall this year as a result. And the Joint Budget Committee is now going to have to go after cash funds. What that means for us is not good news, because they're going to be going after those programs that I talked about, the Front Range Waste Diversion Program and other cash funds like that. And they're going to have to take that money away from recycling to be used for other priorities. Well, what is the good news? Because there is good news. The recycling industry has been declared an essential industry by the Department of Homeland Security. Despite some of the closures that we've heard about happening around the country and also in the state in recycling programs, we believe most of these are temporary, and we're going to see operational and services coming back on, and that's important. Manufacturers depend on feedstocks. And I think there's going to be a big shift, and we already are seeing some of this, away from depending on feedstocks outside of the country, outside of the state, really wanting to see more and more feedstocks nationally and locally. And for example, recyclers are responsible for supplying 58% of the feedstock to paper mills in the US, and that's producing toilet paper and tissues that are in such high demand right now. So we're seeing an increase in that demand. Food and beverage industries have ramped up production to meet unprecedented demand there. And so they need a strong and dependable supply chain of recycled materials. Demand for corrugated cardboard has really gone up with the increase in home deliveries. And even helping to directly fight COVID-19, recycled metals, paper, plastics, and other commodities are feeding into the manufacturing of necessary goods right now, such as rebar, wiring, tubing, transportation, packaging, and other materials needed for construction of hospitals, hospital beds, ventilators, masks, all of those things. The plastic bans that we are seeing, I don't think I mentioned on the last slide, but with kind of this slight rollback in plastic bans out of fear of getting COVID-19 and the coronavirus from being in contact with reusables, and making a push by the plastic industry to really revive the need and necessity of disposable plastics like grocery bags. Well, we're starting to see a little bit more information come out now that's useful, I think, to combat some of this. Health officials are starting to make a statement that reusable bags are not a risk factor in transmitting COVID-19. And then in fact, some new recent studies are indicating that cloth may be better material to use than plastic in deterring COVID-19 transmission. Just the last week or so, UC Berkeley and the city of Berkeley have announced that they will reduce and eliminate single-use plastics by 2030. So they're moving forward, and that is a great sign. Some statements have come out too about the importance and safety of reusables. It's important to share this with your folks. Soap and hot water are effective at killing the coronavirus, and we know home and commercial dishwashers have high temperatures that kill the virus. Disposables, on the other hand, we're not washing those. And they can harbor viruses and bacteria. They're subject to pathogens that have settled on them from the manufacturing, the transportation, and the inventory, stock, and sale of those products. We don't know who's touched those products and where they've been. So I don't think it's safe to say that they are more safe even than reusables. I think that the coronavirus crisis has really showed that we don't have a system in place, the one system that we need for reusables, for to go, to take out, and food delivery. And there's obviously a high increase in disposables around food delivery and takeout right now. So we need to start imagining a future where food delivery systems are built on clean, sanitized, reusable to-go containers and cups. And there are some examples of this around the country: Green Tiffin and Planted Table in San Francisco, Superfine Tiffins in New York City, or just to name a few. But I think there's a lot of room for us to grow here and imagine how much less waste we would have if we had these types of systems in place. I'm always thinking about a red box, you know, it's everywhere. It's in the grocery store, it's at McDonald's. And how, you know, I think that it would be cool if a similar system was set up for reusable takeout containers, where you would go to a red box type vending machine at the restaurant and you would, you know, take out that container, take it up there, have it filled with food, and then take it home, and then you bring it back and return it to be washed by the company, not the restaurant, but by the company running it. And that way, you know, it's a clean circular system. So I think that's a really cool place that we could develop. So we have a great opportunity really in this time of crisis. In a March 25th blog, Suzanne Shelton from the Shelton Group, and they are a sustainability and energy marketing firm. In her blog, Suzanne calls on corporate America to seize the opportunity after COVID-19. She says, we are seeing now how unsustainable our current linear system is. We've stopped the world economy, and what we're seeing is the natural world coming back, bouncing back with lower air pollution, return of wildlife to our urban areas, fish and swans in Venice. I saw a great video the other day of a giant darn it, what is it called?
Jellyfish.
Thank you. Jellyfish. A giant jellyfish floating through the canals in Venice. And of course, we're seeing mountain lions return in Boulder. So wildlife is coming back, and you know, and she makes the point that we can't turn back the clock on our economy to the point we have now where we've stopped it. But it shows that our consumption-based linear economy is destroying our planet. And so now she argues that we really have the opportunity to reimagine how we do things. She says businesses that use the moment now to be creative are the ones who are going to weather the storm and will become the brands of the future. So that gives me hope. She calls out corporate America to do two things related to this. One is to embrace now a commitment to zero impact and shift to a circular economy. Now's the time to do that, to build our circular economy in the aftermath of this storm. We can start building those end markets right here in Colorado, close the loop on other materials like we've done with glass, and really create products that last a long time and can be brought back as source material for new products. Take back those materials instead of sending them to the landfill. And of course, focus on reusables over disposables. She also calls us to advocate for change at the policy level. She says, bake in sustainability into the fabric of our systems. And in doing that, what we're really doing is leveling the playing field. And that's what, you know, City of Boulder has done with its universal zero waste ordinance. It leveled the playing field. It said, yes, some businesses were composting at restaurants, but not all. Now everyone has to do that. And by doing that, those upfront costs of creating a circular economy and having zero impact manufacturing then are covered by all. And there's no one business then that becomes at a competitive disadvantage. So really, if we are all held at the same standard, pricing is going to be comparable and the cost then will come down. So I think that is a great message of hope, and I encourage you to check her out and check her blog that's posted on her website at the Shelton Group. So I'll conclude by giving you some tasks, a call to action, so to speak. I mentioned Senate Bill 55. It's really on a very thin thread right now with where the legislature is coming back after the recess due to the pandemic. And so legislators need to hear from us. that this bill is really important. It's important for rebuilding our economy, which we need now in light of the pandemic. So please contact your state legislators. You can sign up to get our campaign's email list, emailing newsletter. So by doing that, email me at randy@ecocycle.org, and that way I can get you on a list and you can be connected to our action alerts that we send out about what's happening at the state legislature. And then it's very easy for you to contact your legislator and let them know that these things are important to you. Talk to Kate about your business being a Green Star business if it isn't already. Encourage you to become an eco leader. This is part of our network. It's a great way to get resources. We do a lot of wonderful workshops online like we are now, but also in person. Hopefully we can return to that soon. And so it's a great way to get information about what's going on in the zero waste world. So I encourage you to sign up for that. And there's the link for that shown there on the screen. We are currently doing some really neat weekly zero waste videos, taking the time now that people are home with their families to send out little educational videos on different aspects of zero waste. And we just got started. We're in our third week now. So you can go to that link and sign up and get that in your inbox every Friday. It comes also with different activities geared at different age levels for your kids to partake into. So those are short and fun, and encourage you to check those out. And then finally, Recycle Colorado, our statewide nonprofit organization for recycling, has its annual summit August 24th to the 26th. Of course, right now we don't know if we're going to be in person or virtual, but I encourage you to go and sign up for that to participate. We have a lot of great speakers coming. We're actually hoping to have Suzanne Shelton join us for our opening keynote, which would be really cool. And the whole theme is building a circular economy. So it's really going a lot more in depth than what I've talked about today. And there'll be a lot of other businesses there that are doing this kind of stuff. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity to network and learn more. So I encourage you to join us for that. And with that, I will turn it over to Kate.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Randy. That was great. I was getting a few questions sent over to me and then emailed to me by folks who weren't able to make it. So some of them might be a little redundant. Some I'll be able to answer myself as well, but might as well throw them out here. And then everybody who's on the webinar right now, if you look over in the chat box, I put all of the links to the things that Randy has on this last screen, and copy those and put them on a sticky note on your desktop. That way you won't lose them. So Randy, I got one question that said, what if I'm just an interested employee and I can't make big changes on behalf of the company? I know you seem to already cover that. Like, obviously, become an eco leader, watch the zero waste. And honestly, from where I stand and with the businesses that I work with, I cannot stress enough that it's one person who can create such a big difference. Start talking, start saying the things you're interested in, share the video series. You'll never know whose interest you're going to pique. And honestly, talk to your marketing team. They're savvy. They know that if you put something eco this, green that, people will sit up and take a listen. And that's okay if that's why they're doing it. Brandy, do you have anything else that you want to add to that one?
You are so right, Kate. And I would highly encourage you to sign up to be an eco leader, because that's where you're going to network with other people in similar situations, and then have also done those things that you've said, Kate, and have had a lot of success. So it's a great group of folks. We're up to about 1,000 eco leaders now in Boulder County alone, which is really exciting. And it's just an awesome, very energized, very passionate group of people that it's just infectious. And so I think that, signing up, in your level of commitment is totally up to you. So, you can get just the emails and the resources that we send out through that. Or like I said, you can participate more in our workshops and some of our group activities where you can interact more with other folks. But I think that is probably the best way to get started.
It's interesting also, Randy, you said reduce, reuse, recycle, you added repair in there. Um, we're not really doing them right now in person, but we at EcoCycle have You Fix It clinics that I believe are turning into a virtual You Fix It clinic coming up here next week or the following week. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I heard too. So I would suggest folks to go to our website and check out for updates on when that's going to be happening, because I don't know offhand right now. But also, I think when you sign up to be an eco leader, going back to that plug, you will get those updates too.
I'll also include them in a follow-up email with the rest of the links that are in the chat so you can sign up. And always check out, if you're a Green Star business, check out our Google Calendar with all the dates of all the really interesting work that we're doing, everything from eco leader trainings to You Fix It clinics, and really fun webinars with the experts that we get on this. He was clearly trying to get some bonus points with me. They cited the book that we're reading for Green Star Business right now, which is Upcycle, which is the second, it's the version of Cradle to Cradle by McDonough and Brongart. And they said, doesn't a regulation mean that that's bad design? And yes, and we can talk more about creative problem solving and innovation at our book meeting. So not to take up too much time with that right now, but way to get some brownie points.
Can I just add to that, Kate?
Yeah.
I certainly hear what the question or the comment is about, and can relate. And I would say that, you know, there isn't a absolute in any of this, right? So, you know, I think just when I think about the plastic pollution problem that we're facing, and it's such a crisis, or climate change is such a crisis, that, you know, there are some immediate steps that have to be taken now to kind of cut off the flow. You know, we talk about what's flowing out of the faucet, and we just sometimes need to turn off the faucet. And I think that while that is not the ideal, and that is not, you know, going to be necessarily, you know, the solution that is sustainable over the long term, it's something maybe that needs to happen immediately to get us to be thinking better and creating better design. And we may just need that regulation to step in to force us to do that right now.
Perfect. Good points. This is a good one too. Do you see brands allowing their local branches / stores, allowing them to take action that might be seen as political? So there's actually a really good example of that. If you look at companies like, hate to say it, well, no, I don't hate to say it, I love saying it, Patagonia. They do a lot of work on a national and international level, but then their local store is really taking part in a lot of these campaigns, and in fact is starting a pilot with for collecting their plastic bags that seem to come part and parcel with the retail industry. So it's really about, you know, that is obviously a very large brand that already has it baked into their ethos. But again, be creative. You know, one store can really a significant amount of change. And maybe corporate hasn't even thought that a small store would be interested in that. Randy, have you seen that at all with your work on the Hill?
I would, yes, definitely. And we, you know, we certainly welcome partners, business partners, to come and lobby with us on these issues. And, you know, the best way to do that is to become a member of Recycle Colorado, because we have a full-time lobbyist for Recycle Colorado that is on the Hill or at the Capitol the whole time, monitoring bills and things. So, you know, I highly encourage folks to join us in the fight.
All right, we have one more question. I'm trying to pick the best one that I have written down from my text messages. You know, you people can like actually put it in the chat too. You don't have to send me a text message. It's fun. Could we create a list, or is there a list of materials that need to be redesigned fastest, or have an end market created for us first?
Wow, that's a tough one. I think I'm going to have to, defer to some other folks who are really thinking this. I'm just the policy advocate. But I would like to defer to some other folks who are really looking at best practices around the country and what they're recommending. I don't know, Kate, do you have any thoughts about that?
No, I don't, because there's so many different materials out there personally. I have ones that I'm super passionate about that might not fit with the LCA or life cycle analysis that has the biggest impact. But so right now, I'm working with brewers in Boulder County to recycle grain bags, which is a polypropylene woven plastic. I don't know if that's the worst thing going into the landfill, but it was something that was going into the landfill. And there are over 300 breweries in Colorado alone. So if we can get those out of the landfill, that's a big step in the right direction. And you're getting brewers to start thinking, what are we putting in the landfill that could otherwise be diverted in a different manner? That we're also seeing that those bags filter into livestock feed. And Colorado's a huge, that's our main export. So you never really know where it'll take you. So I don't think there's a question, Randy, personally. Yeah. But the answer is whatever material you'll act on first, I think. So put that back in your court.
Right. It's like, what material are you working on? That's what we need to be working on, right?
Perfect. Well, Randy, we're a few minutes over. I think we're good to go. No other questions are in my chat box. Thank you so much. This was phenomenal. And thank you to everybody who showed up. This recording will be made available to everybody who is in and attending the webinar. It'll also be put up on the website, put in an email as well, alongside the links, so you can be involved and take a stand and help us create some circularity in Colorado and internationally. So there's not
great
to be lazy. But all right, thank you again, everybody. Have a good one.
Bye.